Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into, well, a truly unusual set of sources. We've got a transcript from an investigative hypnosis session, but maybe even more importantly, we'll be sort of dissecting the very nature and, the reliability of information that's gathered in this kind of unconventional way. Yeah, we've been handed this unique collection of documents. They aim to unpack these alleged metaphysical insights into a really significant figure, Robert Francis Prevost, often called Pope Leo XIV, right before he was elected. So our mission today is first to explore what was supposedly seen about him, in this session, and then with your help, really unpack how we can even begin to interpret information gathered through such a, distinct lens.
Absolutely. And what's really compelling here, I think, is that these sources don't just give us the revelations. They immediately provide a kind of critical framework for understanding them. It really forces us and you listening to consider not just what is being perceived, but how, right? And why that difference is so paramount when you're dealing with what they call subtle information.
Okay, yeah, let's dive into that first part then. The sources kick off with the setup for this investigative hypnosis session. It features an external hypno-operator, Catalina Kovacs, and she's apparently supported by telepathy, which is supposedly a way to minimize information contamination.
Right, that's the claim.
And the process involves an induction, where the subject relaxes, moves inward, trying to contact this subtle information. Basically, non-physical data, stuff beyond our usual five senses. So the very first perception about Robert Francis Prevost, this is before he became Pope Leo XIV, it reveals some, pretty remarkable details. The operator describes him as a humanoid entity, white-blue apparently, with a heart-shaped head.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And this entity is seen as very grounded, having deep connections with Terra, that's Earth, and described as a force for harmonization on our planet. I mean, that's a striking initial image, isn't it?
It certainly is. It paints this powerful, almost, idealized picture right away, this harmonizer idea, deeply connected to Earth. It immediately sets a tone of, benevolent leadership. It definitely establishes a strong expectation for this figure. Though, you do immediately wonder if such a perfect description might also be serving a particular narrative purpose within the source itself,
Right. Good point. So from his inherent nature, the session then shifts to a really pivotal moment, his election. But seen through this metaphysical lens, it suggests he was, and I quote, already chosen in the metaphysical plan, like preordained destiny. And this happened through a collaboration with the old Pope, which implies this sort of subtle, energetic transfer of information, not just about Vatican policy, apparently, but the Church's broader influence.
A subtle, energetic transfer.
Yeah. Does that suggest some kind of, cosmic deep state in the Vatican, or is there maybe a simpler way to read that?
That's a provocative way to put it. The source definitely presents it as quite intentional. This preordained role, this seamless energetic transition between leaders, even beyond the physical plane, it really challenges our conventional understanding of leadership succession, doesn't it? It puts it in this much broader, non-physical context, almost like a spiritual inheritance or something.
Okay, spiritual inheritance.
Right.
Interesting. Then the session gets into Robert Francis Prevost's past lives. It reveals multiple timelines. One is a terrestrial life, where he apparently went from being an ordinary person to a political leader in some state, maybe like a governor or parliament leader, perhaps in the Roman Empire, potentially named Giulio Vifi.
Giulio Vifi, okay.
And this life was supposedly potentiated, like supercharged by interactions with that white-blue entity we mentioned earlier.
Right, the harmonizer entity. So it's involved across lifetimes.
Seems like it. And in other lives, he's described as embodying subliminal parts of peoples he incarnated into. The idea here is that each of these groups integrates a small piece from his past experiences. And this apparently positions him as a world leader now, because he's integrated all these diverse experiences. His spirit is described as very free, but also very responsible. It's kind of a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
What does that combination, freedom and responsibility, suggest about the kind of influence he's meant to have?
It's a really profound concept, actually. If you connect this to the bigger picture the source is painting, it suggests this continuous evolutionary path across lifetimes. Experiences accumulate, they contribute to some larger mission in the current life, this idea of a leader embodying all this diverse historical wisdom. Well, it's quite significant. It implies a deep, almost archetypal connection with humanity's whole journey.
Okay, so these powerful past life connections are set up. Then the session turns to something that seems simpler, but maybe is just as deep. The significance of his chosen name, Leo XIV. The source says it was intentionally chosen and links back to previous popes named Leo. And the purpose, apparently to revisit and resolve unresolved objectives from those earlier pontificates.
Ah, so like picking up unfinished business from history.
Exactly. And what's really noteworthy here is a specific past life connection they mention. He was allegedly father-son with an earlier Pope Leo. Though, interestingly, not one who was pope in that particular life, maybe Leo V that the source suggests.
Okay, a bit complex.
Yeah. In that life, they supposedly worked together to unify people, bring prosperity through conviction, and promote oneness and well-being through mental connection and organization. This suggests this deep recurring theme of unification that he carries through every life, continually striving to overcome thresholds, from just a single group of people to the entire globe.
That's a strong narrative thread, unification as a core driving force.
The session also touches briefly on whether his election is tied to prophecy. It suggests he will fulfill a prophecy, but his current actions aren't directly linked to it yet. The future, in this view, depends on his personal choices, and interestingly, a Vatican council.
So potential, but not predetermined action. Depends on choices.
Right, then the session shifts again, this time to something with potentially huge implications to the geopolitical landscape, but seen through this energetic lens. The source describes an energetic division and distortion surrounding his appointment. And it specifically links this to a perceived, semi-true U.S. influence on the Catholic Church.
Semi-true U.S. influence. Interesting phrasing.
Isn't it? It claims Catholic countries apparently see him as representing their interest, but there's also a rebellion within the Church about this alleged U.S. intervention. What does this energetic division even suggest about global power in this kind of context?
Well, it's a pretty stark metaphor, isn't it? The source seems to be suggesting this foundational energetic split that's driving geopolitical alignments, almost like a metaphysical fault line running underneath conventional politics. It really shifts the focus from just economic or military power to something like energetic resonance or maybe dissonance.
A metaphysical fault line. Wow. This division even leads to a vision of the world as a nut divided in two, implying potential alliances like America and the Pope versus China and Russia.
A very polarized view.
Extremely. And then there's this really curious mention of Russia. It's described as a neutral strip, extending even to parts of Hungary on some energetic map acting as a testing ground and a struggle zone.
A testing ground.
Yeah, because of the unique consciousness level of its inhabitants, which supposedly creates a different reality there. What's the implication of a testing ground on that kind of scale?
That's a really fascinating detail. It suggests Russia isn't just, a political player in the usual sense, but maybe some kind of crucible for a unique societal evolution or conflict driven by the consciousness of its people. It sort of elevates geopolitics to a spiritual or developmental level almost.
Yeah, it does. And just as a final tangent in this section, they mention the Apennine Mountains gold in Romania.
Oh!
Described as a very high vibration frequency generator, basically a natural power source that reacts to human consciousness. And even a fissure of vibration, like an energetic crack or portal.
Okay, that's quite something.
It is. These supposedly energetic geopolitical insights, they really add a layer of complexity to how we usually think about global power dynamics, don't they?
Absolutely. They introduce this idea that there are underlying currents, subtle influences that aren't immediately visible through traditional analysis, but are supposedly shaping global events. It implies power dynamics operate on more than just the physical plane we see.
Okay, so finally, the session tries to predict his pontificate. And it's described, initially at least, as full of joy, freshness, and life, aiming to shift the perception of religion away from rigid dogma towards the joy of life, trying to attract people who have become alienated by past rigidity or, hidden incidents within the church.
So a rejuvenating force, essentially.
That's the idea. However, a surprising prediction emerges right at the end of this part. His pontificate will apparently end quickly and abruptly.
Oh, wow.
Not through death, the source says, but a withdrawal from the physical, suggesting he be pulled from the function against his will.
Pulled? By whom?
Orchestrated, supposedly, by a Vatican conjuncture, maybe a council of cardinals, who decide his actions or changes are not beneficial. It's quite the dramatic twist to his alleged journey.
Wow, yeah. From harmonizer to being forcibly removed. That's quite a narrative arc.
Definitely. Okay, now let's take a big step back. Let's bring in the second part of our source material, because this is a crucial disclosure from the same YouTube channel that produced the Hypnosis session. And this section critically examines the whole nature and reliability of investigative hypnosis itself. And, well, it sheds a very different light on everything we've just heard.
Right, and this raises that important question we touched on earlier. If the initial perceptions about Pope Leo XIV sound so positive, harmonizer, bringer of joy, how could there possibly be a deeper, more manipulative agenda at play, which this next part suggests? This is exactly where the disclosure becomes so critical. It urges us to look beyond that appealing surface narrative.
Okay, so the session, during what it calls its free exploration phase, revisits that white-blue entity. It's described now as bringing knowledge from other planets, linked to Andromeda, apparently making up 10% of the Pope's hybridization.
Hybridization, meaning a blend of human and non-human essences.
That's the implication. And this hybridization supposedly isn't new. It's carried from previous lives, providing knowledge and potentiation of persuasive power for, get this, non-dictatorial leadership, almost like manipulation perfected.
Manipulation perfected through non-dictatorial means. That sounds insidious.
It does, but here's the real twist according to this disclosure part of the source.
Yeah.
The underlying purpose of all this harmonization on Earth is revealed to be control.
Control, not harmony.
A subtle control, apparently only perceptible at very high consciousness levels, and originating from outside the space of this white-blue entity itself. So the entity might be a conduit, not the source of the control.
Okay, so the harmonizer image was perpetually deceptive. How does this control supposedly work?
Right, the method is described as working through the joy frequency. The idea is people are sort of programmed, maybe culturally or inherently, to associate good things with high vibrations. Joy, peace, unconditional love. We all seek those, right?
Of course, they feel good.
Exactly. But this source presents that as a potential trick. If you aren't consciously aware of your own inner energy and able to manage and modulate it, even alchemize all frequencies, positive and negative meaning, transform or integrate them consciously.
Right, not just chase the highs.
Precisely. Then this connection to high vibrations, like joy, can actually lead to a loss and extraction of energy by what the source calls collectors.
Collectors, like energetic parasites.
That's the implication. Entities or forces that benefit from this unaware energetic outflow from people caught up in passively experiencing good vibes.
Wow. That really challenges the simplistic New Age notion that all high vibrational states are inherently good or safe. It suggests that without self-awareness, without conscious energy management, even positive states could potentially be exploited, leading to a loss of your own inner power, your sovereignty.
Exactly. And the source even quotes the ancient saying, "The truth shall set you free," as being key here. To truly manage your energy requires presence and connection to all of your structures, your whole being, not just the five senses.
It's a call for discernment. Really deep discernment, isn't it? Not just accepting pleasant feelings at face value.
Absolutely. So what does all this mean when we think about the method used to get this information in the first place? The hypnosis. Well, the disclosure part states this very, very clearly. There's no such thing as a reliable single session of investigative hypnosis.
No such thing. That's a strong statement from the source itself.
It is. Information obtained this way is described flatly as highly contaminated. The source explains why. Information supposedly travels through many dimensions, densities, and different consciousnesses, different layers of reality and awareness. Any of these can distort the information, voluntarily or involuntarily. Then it has to be interpreted by the hypno-operator's own mind, their beliefs, culture, past experiences, everything.
Yeah, filters upon filters upon filters.
Right. He uses this really vivid analogy. Imagine trying to talk underwater in different languages, using only hand gestures. The information gets completely deformed.
That's a powerful image. So it means that while that whole narrative about the Pope's past lives, his mission, his future, while it's compelling, maybe even fascinating, its factual accuracy is immediately called into serious question by the very methodology described in the same source material.
Exactly. And the purpose of information that comes through in hypnosis, according to this disclosure, isn't even to provide factual data for you to memorize. It's meant to serve as a vehicle of movement, like a symbolic story, to help address a client's personal problem or blockage, not objective reporting.
So therapeutic narrative, not investigative fact-finding, in a single session context.
That seems to be the distinction they're making. The disclosure then outlines how real investigation, the kind needed to yield reliable information through these means, is actually done. It's described as long, difficult, tiring work, often done in teams, requiring Thousands of sessions.
Thousands.
Thousands. From many different people, different operators, different subjects, and only the tiny bit of information that is common to almost all sessions, like a mere 2–3% of the total data gathered.
Just 2–3%.
Yeah, that tiny fraction is deemed reliable. The rest, 97–98%, is considered trash noise, contamination, personal projections, you name it.
That's an incredibly high noise-to-signal ratio.
It really is. They compare it to getting information from official news sites versus random blogs. One has built-in checks, editorial processes, widespread scrutiny. The other doesn't.
Makes sense. So a single hypnosis transcript, like the one detailing the Pope's story, would be like reading one random blog post and taking it as verified fact.
According to the source's own disclosure, yes. And there are other limitations highlighted too. Consciousness, maybe the subject's higher self or some other entity, might simply not authorize information outflow. It might block access. Or perhaps more worryingly, cunning entities might exploit the situation, jumping in to give distorted or manipulative information, maybe even pretending to be someone else.
Right. The risk of deliberate deception is high in that state.
Seems so. And the current investigative cycles mentioned in the disclosure, the ones using this rigorous multi-session method, they're specifically focused on restricted topics. Things like pedophilia in the Catholic Church is one example given, because broad topics, like the entire life and destiny of a pope, would require an abnormal number of sessions to filter out reliable data. It's just too vast, too much potential for contamination.
So the very scope of the Pope Leo XIV session makes its reliability by these standards extremely questionable.
That seems to be the unavoidable conclusion based on the source's own critical assessment of its methods. Phew. What a journey we've been on in this deep dive, huh? We started with what seemed like these incredible, almost fantastical revelations about a major spiritual leader. His origins, past lives, mission, the geopolitical scene he might navigate, even that prediction of a quick end to his pontificate.
Yeah, a really detailed and dramatic story. But then, crucially, we peeled back that other layer. Our own sources gave us the vital context about how that information was gathered. We learned about the really profound challenges in getting reliable data through investigative hypnosis, the high contamination rates, those subtle mechanisms of potential control disguised as positivity, and the sheer scale of work, thousands of sessions needed to maybe distill even a tiny sliver of truth.
It leaves us with just so much to consider, doesn't it? This deep dive wasn't really just about Pope Leo XIV in the end. It was about the very nature of information itself, how it's perceived, how it can be potentially manipulated, and maybe most importantly, how we as listeners, as learners, as people trying to figure things out, can approach these kinds of seemingly extraordinary insights.
With critical thinking, with awareness of the methodology, with discernment.
Exactly. So maybe for you, our listener, the question to ponder is this: what stands out about how easily, according to this source, something like good vibrations or a really positive narrative could potentially become a trap? How do you discern truth, especially when it comes wrapped in something that feels so profound or spiritually significant? It's definitely a question worth mulling over long after this deep dive ends.